I won $50, but I had to go to law school. That was the sad part. And that's true. Okay. I had never thought about law school. I wasn't really even sure that women were allowed to go to law school. I had no burning desire to change America. I was a social worker, and I did a lot of sort of community activism before I went to law school. So it really was a surprise in my life. It was also a time of Vietnam War, so there were 5,000 applicants to get into University of California, Berkeley, Bolt Hall, and there were about 150 people chosen. I was one of them, and I really thought that was some higher power telling me to straighten up my life and get serious. So I went to law school. I was 27 at the time, which was older than most people. And of course I had no expectations whatsoever about law school. So when you say, was it different than what you expected, there's no baseline.
And were there a lot of women in your class?
No. There were about 20 of us, I think. Most of us were older. By older, I mean we were still in our 20s, but in the later 20s. Most were married. Most had better reasons to be there than I did. All of them had better reasons to be there than I did, in that they had a reason to be there other than a $50 badge. But we became, close friends because that was a little bit of the bunker mentality. We all did very well in law school. I think because we were a little older and we were very scared and we didn't have any expectation except we knew to put our heads down and work really hard.
What about sort of the feminist movement at the time? It was pretty big. I mean, it was sort of at its, it was strong then. I mean,
it was Berkeley.
Right,
so,
exactly, right. So
the feminist movement was really a backseat to Vietnam and Richard Nixon. And the first year I was in law school, the Attica happened, the prison riots and massacre. The second year, the Israeli Olympic team was massacred, and the third year, we impeached the President of the United States. So it was archly political, but not necessarily about feminism.
And did you feel, we've interviewed a bunch of people, and some of the women have said terrible stories about law school. Some have loved law school. Some have felt very sort of pinpointed as a woman during law school. Others didn't. And I wanted to know if you felt with your little group, did you feel, were you just isolated, or was there lots of, what was it like compared to
I think, first of all, I was at Berkeley.
Right.
So the community there is a much larger community than just feminism or non-feminism.
Right.
As with everyone in law school, you identify primarily with your small section in your first year. And that was mixed. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of women who are still good friends of mine, and a couple of men who are still good friends of mine. So I don't think I ever clung to a group of women more than just a group that was identified as a small section. Mm-hmm. The school promoted always people being outside just law school. The circumstances of Berkeley in that particular time as a leader in civil rights movement and anti-war movement and pretty much any movement meant that law students were encouraged to go take active leadership roles in anything going on lower campus or in the greater community. So we were not particularly isolated from each other or from the bigger world. If you ask me, did I like law school? I don't really remember. I don't like school. I don't like school. I don't learn very well in a standard classroom setting, which is all you had in law school then. So, I wasn't a diligent student about attendance. If something caught my imagination, I really enjoyed it and went to class and learned a lot. Sometimes the opposite was true. I worked 40 hours all through law school from the very first day to the very end. Would never have considered not working. I've worked since I was 15, so I didn't know how not to work, and I love working, and I like learning while I'm working, so I worked in law firms. So that part was really critical to my success in law school.
How did you get it all? How did you do all of that? How did you work 40 hours and get classes and sleep?
I skipped a lot of classes, but I didn't take a job in order to skip classes. I just, in all candor, have never been a very faithful attendee of classes, and I don't say that on this video in order to encourage people to stop going to classes. I think you really should go. I just had something about the way I learned didn't really fit that, and Because I was older, I think I was extraordinarily efficient at school. There wasn't anything about school that was particularly challenging logistically. I have high energy. I always have. I don't need to sleep very much. So it wasn't hard to fit that in. You know, you figure you're in school about 20 hours a week, you're working 40 hours a week. That's still only 60 hours a week. So there were plenty of time to study and learn and also earn a living.
And we've asked this of a bunch of people, Professor Ayers. We start with Professor Ayers on this question. Were you perfect in law school? I mean, did everything go perfect for you, or were there times where things didn't go right? I mean, whether it's in class or your grades, or like a lot of students will look at you and look at others and think, oh well, I'm not like her because I didn't do as well as
I can honestly say I don't believe I ever had a perfect moment even in law school, much less a perfect law school. I mean, I can't. Who would ever say they had a perfect law school experience?
I don't think that
it's just
people.
So strange.
Yeah, I don't think people would say it, but I think that students think it. I mean,
Yeah.
if they look at people and where they are and where you are, and think, well, I couldn't be where you are because I'm not as perfect as you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. I mean, we
Yeah.
all had heroes,
Right.
and hopefully still have some. But in terms of my performance in law school, surprisingly, I was very, very quiet. In part because if I was in a class that I loved, I just wanted to listen and learn. If I was in a class that I didn't like, I was totally mentally absent and was writing letters to people, or playing crossword puzzles, or being extremely childish in my attitude, or I wasn't there at all. I was at the law firm doing work, which I really loved to do. So I don't think anybody would remember me as a stellar student. I got good grades, but I don't think getting good grades in law school has very much to do with, this is probably heresy of the highest order, doesn't necessarily have very much to do with how much you've actually understood the whole panoply of law and its integration of one course to another. I write well, I have a good memory, or used to when I was younger, and those things, and I'm never afraid of a test. I'm just never afraid of them, and that's a lot of your ability to do well in a test, is not to be panicked about it.
Why aren't you afraid? Why do you think?
Because I don't think those kinds of tests really mean anything about who I am. Your fear comes from a fear of failure, and to me that has very little to do with whether I'm a success or failure.
Are there other things that you're afraid of in terms of law?
Yes, I'm afraid of disappointing clients. I'm afraid of not doing a good job for them because they've hired me to do something and it's serious to them, and I take that seriously, and that's a trust that's created, and I always respond to a personal responsibility. But I've never felt a personal responsibility to a class. That's kind of unilateral, in my opinion. I have to do it or not do it.
Is the fear with disappointing clients a good fear or a bad fear? Is it?
For me, it's an inexorable fear, so I guess I'd be hesitant to characterize it one way or another. It just is there. And fear is a strong word. I mean, it's a motivation also. I see it as more positive than negative. But if you say, is there something that really you feel driven by that you didn't feel in law school, it is the responsibility of another human being or other humans to do something I promised to do or said I would try to do.
All right, before we get off this topic, I have one more question. So, okay, so grades, people hear that people say grades aren't a measure of how you, but then you get to employers and they care about grades and your ranking. So isn't that a mixed message to students?
Absolutely. And I had the good fortune to come through law school at a particular time when I was young enough to be able to stand a lot of pressure and not sleep very much and all those things. I have a skill set that lent itself very easily to law school at that time, which was I read fast, I retain information well, I write well, and I have a good memory for multiple choice or something like that. So I just got blessed, if you were, with things that made grades not so difficult for me. I think that students now who are looking at this job market and saying, well, how can I compete, really have to have some different models. because not everybody's going to end up with all A's, no matter what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I think first they need to decide that not getting all A's doesn't mean they're going to be bad lawyers. It certainly doesn't mean they're bad people or they're stupid or any of those things. They just have to say, what are my strengths? What can I bring to the profession? It's very much dependent on just who I am, and how can I find an avenue to demonstrate those and use those creatively in the field. It may or may not be the traditional path of law review, large firm, partnership, death. And it would probably be a lot more interesting than that, frankly. But it is true that the marketplace rewards, certain pieces of the legal marketplace reward only grades.
And what if you're a student who does want to do sort of, do you, it feels like sometimes that if you don't get good grades, then you have to be in government, or that you get relegated to that you can't, obviously you can't be at that large firm, but I guess it just seems like sort of horrible in some way. I don't know, that you're creating this elite, but that's just the way it is, that there's nothing you can do about that. Is that sort of the way the world is?
No, for lots of reasons. First of all, large firms are terrible places for young lawyers to go. I've always felt that, and I've been in large firms, so I think I know what I'm talking about. There are rare exceptions, but generally speaking, a large firm does not mentor young people anymore. They just use them as cannon fodder to bill hours, et cetera, et cetera. So you're not really necessarily in a learning curve. The pressures are all market-driven, and the kind of law you do is usually quite insulated from the actual client. So I think for those reasons, at least, the opportunities that are available to people who are not at the top of their class grade-wise are more interesting opportunities. They also challenge you to do it yourself. You go into a large law firm, there is no creativity allowed. You cannot walk up to a senior partner in a large law firm as a first or second year student and say, Joe, I've been looking at the way you do things around here, and I really think we have some efficiency problems. What about A, B, C, D? You would be polishing your resume by noon. It's considered uppity and inappropriate. If you have to invent yourself because that particular path isn't your path, great. What better way to start mastering all the good parts about being a lawyer, which is critical thinking, analytical thinking, problem solving. Apply it to yourself. Do for you what you're going to be doing for clients at your highest level of performance.
So, okay, a couple things then. So do you think that idea of the large law firm is like, it's sort of a residual idea of like that you should be at these big firms because you learn so much, and that because it's now so market driven? Do you think sort of it's just a model that's sort of passé, even
yes,
though?
Absolutely. And it's not that I think large law firms are going to die tomorrow. I think there will always be some. There's a niche for everything. But I think their role as the leader of American delivery of legal services is gone. The patient has died. Nobody wants to go to the funeral, but it just has. We've lost a good number of large law firms in Arizona because the economics of the practice could not be supported any longer by commerce. So, and by that I mean the billable hour pyramid. You have to keep bringing bodies in at the baby level that can bill enormous numbers of hours for clients who are willing to pay top dollar for enormous numbers of hours to keep the people at the top supported. And that's just not the way commerce sees lawyers any longer. They're smarter. They demand more efficiency. They want better kinds of contracts about fees. All of those things are at play too. So I know that large law firms have ceased to be the driving force in the practice of law in the United States.
So if those new models with commerce driving new models, does that mean that billable hours, do you think that billable hours is also sort of an archaic way of going, or do you think that'll always?
I think it's unethical. It's not only archaic. I think the minute you start charging somebody by a billable hour, you've created an adversary relationship with your own client. The more efficient you are, the less your client has to pay. So it's better for your client and worse for you. So I think just billable hours without very careful discussions and negotiations with your client about what that really means, I think that's very, very offensive. And I think it makes for very bad lawyering. It rewards all the things you shouldn't be doing as a lawyer. Delay, lack of focus, repetitive conduct that is not driven by the outcome that you seek, all those things. Whereas I think other forms of payment for lawyers tend to reward efficiency and partnering with your client rather than a hands-off adversary position.
So I think we talked a little bit with Diane about this too. So tell me a little bit about other ways of billing clients besides billable hours that you think are good ways of going.
Well, first of all, I think there are times where billable hours fine, as long as you've identified and budgeted hours for certain pieces of work. Just to say your goal is to get back your apartment building and you're going to pay me however many billable hours it takes me to do that, that seems to me to be wildly inappropriate on sort of a license to steal in a way. But if you said, in order to get from here to getting your apartment building back, I see 12 steps, and here's what I see happening in each of those steps. These are approximates, I can't give you exact, but at least we have some idea that we've agreed on what would happen. So I think the first piece of it is to try to narrow down what your goals are, what the steps are to get there, and how many hours of lawyering you think it will take to get there within billable hours.
Before you go on, do firms do that?
Yes, firms are forced to do that more and more by clients. Firms on their own would never do that because why would they? You'd say, I think I'll make less money this year and it'll be my idea. But clients are forcing them to do that. Litigation budgets have been a part of the landscape for at least the last 10 years, and they're picking up a lot of speed as people get more and more savvy within the client community about how they can control costs.
We also interviewed another immigration lawyer, and they were saying that people from other countries have no concept of the billable hour. They'd rather pay per, whatever the service is.
Right.
Do you find that that's different working?
Well, we deal in our office with just U.S. corporations,
Okay.
and we don't require the foreign national to make any payments. All the payments are made by the U.S. employer. But in my career, I certainly have worked with about 50,000 foreign nationals, and of course they bring their culture to them, and to the issue rather. And often it's a matter of, yes, we'll pay a flat fee, or even better, we'll pay the government official a flat fee. That's also a part of their culture sometimes, and not a part of ours. Contingent fees are another way to bill for a lawyer's time. Plaintiff lawyers have pretty much perfected that, and I think you find that oftentimes that's a very effective and appropriate way to deliver legal services. A fixed fee for an identified service, that's something we do in our office because it's a regulatory area of law, and it's easier to fix a little box around a particular task and decide what it's going to cost ahead of time. Value added, so that if you have an hourly rate that's relatively low, but you reach the success point that you and your client have agreed upon earlier and at a lesser cost, you get a premium. You get a reward for being good, I guess. That's another way to look at it, where you really do share in the upside and share in the downside. So there are lots of things out there like that.
And billable hours, is it something that only people starting out are obsessed with? Or do you get to a point where you don't worry about billable hours as much? Or is it something that just is constantly there?
Not anymore. Not in a large firm. Everybody has to carry their own weight because the pyramid is collapsing. So you have this awkward thing of downsizing senior partners in large firms whose usefulness is marginal. They're not rainmakers. They're just kind of hanging on. They're not leaders in their field particularly. And every firm has them by the dozens. I mean, I could tell you, and it's very difficult because culturally those people were led to believe that their twilight years would be comfortable sitting at their big desk for a few hours every day and taking home a big check. And the game has changed, and now people have to produce. So if you're 60, doing 1,600 hours is a lot of time. Doing 1,800 is almost ridiculous, and doing $2,200 is enough to put you in the coronary ward, probably.
Because why? Because, I mean, compared to the younger ones, because they're older, or because their efficiency has gotten to the point where that's just a lot of work? Or
It's more work that most people want to do. I'm
Mhm.
speaking generally now. There's some people that
Right.
want to die in the saddle, but
Mhm.
most people want to slow down. Your hourly rate has to go up. Remember, this is not a flat landscape where you just add hours. You're supposed to be so fabulous that people are willing to pay $500 an hour for your time. Maybe if you're Brad Pitt, but aside from that, it's hard to imagine somebody really being worth that. A few lawyers in America maybe, but not every senior partner at every firm. So you've got to worry about how are you going to bill 1,600 hours at $350 an hour? Who's going to pay for that? And what work would you be generating that would justify either the volume of hours or that amount of hours that you shouldn't be pushing down to younger lawyers at a lower rate if you're doing the right thing by your client? So, this is difficult stuff. Maybe some merger and acquisition work, maybe some SEC, IPO work. You could say the pop is so big and my skills are so unique, I'm really worth this to you. But how many is that? 100 lawyers in the country?
so what happens to the rest of them? I mean, it just seems like that would be impossible. Yeah.
It's very
Interesting.
painful times for lawyers in large firms. I mean, you talk to them, they're not happy campers up and down the ladder because this transition is very profound and very difficult to manage at every level of the firm, from senior people all the way down to baby people.
All right, so if that model's just dying, and that was what, like, you got out of law school, and if you really wanted to be like the perfect, do everything great, you go to a big firm. So what are you looking for now? What's the whole point? What should the goals be? Like, if you're thinking, if you're in law school right now, that model isn't one that you really should base your life on. Do you know what I mean?
It's horrifying when young people tell me they want to base their life on life in a large firm. I just want to give them a one-way ticket to Europe and say, get a life. I think if you're in that situation, you should go, you should work very hard, you should look for the brightest lawyers and the ones you like the most in the firm without regard to whether they're the people that can give you the golden lift up into partner land or something. By the way, it's 10 years out, so who knows whether you even want it by then. I don't mean you should ever go to a large firm and take advantage of them unjustly, but you certainly should use the system to further your own skills. If you ask me what should a young lawyer bring when they graduate that will help them set a course that's intelligent, it would bring your passion. If you don't know why you went to law school, I didn't, but you have passions in your life that preceded law school or were developed in law school, that's your lodestar. That's where you have to go. Whether or not a large firm is going to celebrate that passion is irrelevant because it's your passion. So you get to carry it wherever you go. If you hang out a shingle, you'll be the one that's going to develop the great skills there because you're so motivated by your own desires, your own goals, not anybody else's, no overlay.
So give me an example of what you mean by passion.
You really feel that the thing in law school that caught your imagination was the need for a legal system to address child abuse. Well, there is no large law firm in the United States of America that has a core practice in defending children against abuse of parents. Should there be? Probably. But, who's going to pay? Which is very revealing about the whole market dynamic of a large law firm. So are you going to say, well, okay, I guess I can never do that area of law? Of course you can't have that as your answer. You're going to have to think creatively. How can I take this passion to the marketplace? First of all, am I willing to take less money than if I'm an SEC lawyer? You better be, because there'll probably be less money. Although you never know. You might be the person that brings the class action lawsuit against, 50 state child protective services, and you're like the tobacco industry and get $1 billion. Anything's possible. But the point is, you have to make that happen. And when you do make that happen, you'll be so much happier because it's your passion and you feel all right about it. How would you do it? Maybe you go work for government for a while. Maybe you get 2 or 3 friends in your law school or 2 or 3 friends in other law schools and you say, how could we set up a small firm that would do family law And X part of this would always be dedicated to representing children, because you do get paid to represent children in abuse cases through, the family court, etc. What do we need to make that grow? How much money does it actually take? So you have to be pretty good business people, and you also have to have the passion, and you also have to have the guts to go out there and break the mold.
Okay, a bunch of questions.
I'm going to blow my nose now.
I guess this is a question I try to ask other people. I think there's a sense of the whole thing of money and being a lawyer, I think, is really problematic. And it seems like, and I don't want to harp on the large law firms. You get a whole gamut of,
Sure.
of money. And I think being a student, you don't really understand, like, where you fit within that. I mean, do you have to have a passion, does that mean that you won't have any money at all? How much money does it take to live? Do you have to be, like, super fabulous? You know what I mean? Like, it just, like, money is such an odd thing, and it's so part of being a lawyer in some way.
It shouldn't be. It
at least
doesn't
from the
have to
student
be.
point of view, because, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Lawyers created an image that they were in the moneyed class. And they were always above the fray, elegantly dressed, and worth an enormous amount for no apparent reason, we might add. And that continues to be the myth. I just saw some horrible new television show, and I don't know the name of it, so don't even ask me. Actually, I think it was called, no, I don't know what it was. Anyway, it's a young man who's in his father's cushy firm in Philadelphia, and he gets caught with some drugs, so he ends up having to go spend 1,200 volunteer hours at a children's protective services. So, the tensions are trite and Hollywood born. Am I going to be a good person, or I'm going to be a rotten person snorting coke at my desk in the high rise, But one of these great Dabney Coleman, I love him. He's the father, the patriarch of the firm. And of course, he's just exactly like what you say. He's a silk stocking, blue blood lawyer whose only mission in life is to make sure the firm makes huge amounts of money. So my point is, the stereotype continues. And I think, of course, young people coming out of law school, especially young people coming out of law school, have these things they all have to do at once. Grow up, support themselves, make their way through a very, very insular, isolated profession that's still largely male-dominated, even though, that's changing too, and try to figure out who they are at their essence in the midst of all of these layers that other people have put on them. So, yeah, I think it's really hard to figure out, what does money mean to you? One of the nice things about a large firm is they give you a big salary at first. One of the bad things is you'll spend all the salary, and so you're further in debt than ever, because you start to feel like you're entitled to it, okay? And you're working 2,200 hours. You're very bitter about that, and so you go out and buy a BMW or a bigger house, or the toys that make us think that our lives are successful. So I don't really think it gets you out of debt. What money means as a lawyer should be what money means to you anyway. And if it means a lot, then you better find a kind of law where you're going to make a lot of money. If it doesn't mean that much to you, then you're so far ahead of the game. I'm delighted to know you, because it means you will give yourself permission, time, the opportunity to do great things with law, without money as your primary reason for doing it.
Do you think that your ideas about money, that you come with what your ideas about money, or do you form them in law school, or do you have to think about them? Is it something that you should be consciously thinking about, sort of what your value system is before you're sort of embarking on all of this? Where does that come from?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, you should sit down before you even apply to law school and say, what are the things that people like about me? What are the things I like about myself? What do people say about me? You can do this kind of psych test, I guess, and you probably should, so you have a baseline of what you want to be, how you want other people to see you, and how you want to feel about yourself. And then you want to start measuring that all through law school, because you'll find that fewer people like you. You become more contentious and more aggressive and less playful and all the kinds of things. So you need to be benchmarking that. And when you start to be a lawyer, I think you also want to always take stock of, what kind of person am I? And how close is that to the kind of person I said I wanted to be? So I think your question's very profound. Young people don't normally do that analysis. They instead wake up at about age 35 and say, I hate my life. You know, how did this happen? And of course they're perfectly willing to look at all the outside reasons that might have happened as opposed to the inside reasons for having let it happen.
All right, so I'm going to ask you then a little bit about, we have other questions on that, but the hate my life part, let's get to that.
Okay.
Because everyone gets to that point at some point in their life, that there's a moment when things aren't going well, and sort of, if they, let's say people just don't, they don't quite do what we were just talked about, and then they do end up in a place that they hate your life, and then they think back to this video and sort of that idea of like, when you do hate your life, when things go wrong, what do you do? And you always get that sense that sort of stereotype of lawyers hating their, buying lots of toys and hating what they do every day.
Yeah.
So what do you do? So you don't either get in that space or...
Well, first of all, lawyers aren't unique in that.
Right.
You know, lots of people don't like their life, and lawyers are only unique in that they have these skills they learned in law school to blame everybody else for it. Probably go sue somebody over it. But the answer, I think, is to say, who is it you want to be? You have to look in the future. You can't just look at the past for all the footsteps that put you where you are. You have to say, well, what is it I don't like about my life, and how is it I can change that? What things did I do? What patterns do I have? What personality traits have I cultivated that put me in this situation? And how can I change those? That's not different whether you're an accountant or a hairdresser or anything. And I think fundamentally the answer is know yourself. You have to know yourself. And we never know ourselves all the way, but you have to at least pay some attention to who you are as a person. And second, be motivated by your passion. Because that's inside. That will not go away. That will flower and grow and nurture you all your life. If you're motivated only by these outside things, the senior partner's view of whether you're a good person, your BMW, you have absolutely guaranteed an emptiness in your life that will eventually catch up with you, unless you're brain dead, So when people are down, I think what you do is you get outside help. You get outside counseling help. Lawyers are very hesitant to do that, as though we're revealing some kind of attorney confidentiality, But they need help. We're not particularly educated about our emotions in law school. It's much more cerebral than emotional. So we need help. I'd say first thing you do is be honest with yourself. Are you really miserable? Second, can you pinpoint some of the things that have put you there? Third, can you go get some professional help to think through the crisis? Fourth, are you ready? Are you sufficiently miserable that you're ready to make profound changes in the way you approach things, whether it be your job or your relationships with other people, the way you behave as a lawyer, for instance. A lot of people out there that believe in the junkyard dog theory of litigation, they're terribly miserable people. All they're doing is spawning anger everywhere they go. And of course, at some point, they are just venomous inside and out. So they're not going to like themselves very much. They could change the way they practice law and probably be better, healthier people.
So a lot of times change is focused on like being miserable and wanting to get out of things. Have you had experiences where change was either that way or just you were ready to move on, or new opportunities or something creative came along? That change doesn't have to be because things are bad.
Right, intended change,
right.
I think. Absolutely. I think they sort of have three levels of change. One is when something happens and it's better than you thought. One is when something happens and it's worse than you thought. And the third is when everything's really probably okay, but you've decided to make a purposeful decision. The third one is always ideal for lawyers because it draws on our skills. We can look at the landscape, analyze the situation, get an action plan, and move on. The second one is very difficult for anyone to manage, whether it's individually or nationally. Things drop out of the sky on your head, you weren't expecting it, illness or something like that, or you get fired from your job. How you cope with that, I think, is absolutely you get professional help. I think it's always important, and I encourage everybody to do that I know, because I think it's so important. In my own life, when that's happened, I have a tremendous number of friends. They're a great support group. I have a wonderful family, and they're a great support group. So, and I'm very verbal, and I'm very right at the top with my emotions, which I think is an advantage in those kinds of crises. So I could just sit down and go, everything's wrong, help. what's happening here, and somehow collectively I'll work my way out of it. I'm a very optimistic person, and that's just a personality trait. So if you say, what if you're a downer, and you don't have any friends and all that, it's much harder. And you'd have to plan ahead a little bit and say, these are the things I know I need to put in my life, both to prevent the dark moments as much as I can, and then to get out of them when I'm there.
Like what?
Well, I think have a list of people you can call on. Go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist when you're healthy and say, just want to know I may be back. I tend to have these ups and downs or something. Talk to people that have gone through difficult times, whom you admire and who have handled it well. Make sure that you're honest with friends so that you don't have to hide behind a certain persona. You can show some vulnerability to people, and you're still going to be there later for you. No matter how awful something in my life has been, when I've shared it with people, and I don't mean just anybody in the produce department at Safeway, but people that I trust, invariably they can one-up me. So everybody's gone through really excruciating things in their life. Every lawyer's gone through excruciating personal moments and professional moments. So there's a lot of resources out there.
All right, let's switch topics a little bit. We'll talk about sort of the business of law, you and Diane have this fabulous place. How did this start, and how do you, what is it to be running a place like this? I mean, in terms of like a law student who doesn't really understand the sort of economics of a business, of a law firm, those sorts of things.
It's enormous amount of fun. It's really fun. And I think primarily because this really is our passion. I don't say those things hollowly. I practice immigration law. I graduated from a very good law school, and I graduated high in my class. I went to a large law firm right after I graduated. I did the golden path kind of thing. And I really didn't like it. I didn't like doing environmental law, which is what I was supposed to be doing. And I was diligent and I think was pretty successful, but it's pretty hollow for me. I always wanted to be on the other side suing our clients. And I discovered employment law and worked with a wonderful lawyer at the time who's now on the Supreme Court, Bud Jones. He was a terrific mentor and very kind, not driven by money, by the way, which is probably why he's on the court now. And so what I learned from that is I was a good lawyer doing something that was assigned to me, and I was a really good lawyer when I did something that I loved, that called on the things in me that I really believe in. So at the same time, I started doing immigration law, which I'd done all through law school, because I'd been a Peace Corps volunteer when I was 19 and came back at 21 and went on and developed a program that I had funded by a private foundation when I was still in undergraduate school that put together new arrival immigrants and American teenagers, Black Panthers, the Brown Berets, pretty avant-garde stuff, in Oakland and San Francisco. So I had always been, from the time I was 19, fascinated by foreigners in our country. And I had been a foreigner in another country for a long time. So I never left that devotion, I guess, and interest in it. And I started working for the cleaning crews in the downtown high-rises in Phoenix, who were often Vietnamese then in the early 70s, and Mexican. I speak Spanish. And so I had my night job, which of course was completely pro bono and off the books, And then I had my day job, which was more and more employment law, and they're very connected. And over a period of time, I realized I want to do this immigration stuff all the time. And just as I started to bring it out of the closet, as it were, a hospital in town had a huge nursing shortage, a very big client of the firm. And I knew how to get nurses in from the United Kingdom and from the Philippines. It's an immigration, part of the immigration law. So suddenly I had a sort of socially acceptable skill as opposed to what I love doing. I mean, I had people coming during the day to the Tony lobby of the law firm where I worked, which is still very dear to me, by the way, and was not a large law firm in the traditional sense. And anyway, they brought live chickens to pay me. So it was time to kind of get things back as a holistic piece. And this gave me the opportunity to do that. So I started doing immigration law primarily for companies, but for tiny companies and individuals who were coming here to work and all. And from that, it just grew over the years to be an increasingly focused now law firm that does nothing but that.
And so how did you decide to leave? I mean, how did you decide to start this? I mean,
My own firm?
Mhm.
I mean, this is the second time I've had my own firm. I was with a large firm for 10 years. First woman they ever hired, first woman partner. You know, that's an uncomfortable role, and you never signed up for that. They were very gracious to me, and I still have good friends there and all that. But it's clear that a Berkeley radical probably needed a different forum. And so I left to form my own firm shortly thereafter with 2 other lawyers, both men. And then we were scooped up by a national law firm a couple of years later. And I stayed with them for 10 years. And then left that large firm, so 600, 700 lawyers, to form this because of our client needs. I've always had a very, very good group of clients, and they became more sophisticated during the 90s as immigration became more important to them. Finding high-tech, highly skilled, super educated people to do things, particularly in the information industry. And so our clients who needed to have extremely fast response times and a lot of technological support couldn't wait for the amount of time it took a large law firm to do any of those things. So any large company, not just a law firm, but any large company usually has to build toward the middle. So if you have 29 practice groups all fighting for resources, you know, that's a problem, management problem, that you're not going to solve probably by saying, let's give this little guy over here a whole bunch of stuff first. So it just became very clear that to do what we wanted to do for our clients, we needed to be much more lean and mean, if you will, and get out to a smaller situation, very focused practice, where everything was dedicated to client service.
and in the other example, are you talking about resources or just being able to make decisions?
All of it.
All of it.
Every single thing that you can imagine, from who are we going to hire to help us with a new client we just got, what kind of technology do we have, this is what our clients need technologically, we don't have it, can we get it, how quickly can we make decisions, who makes decisions, do people right on the ground with the practice area, or is it committees in a distant city that are trying to control the firm's resources intelligently. Every single piece of it was problematic for a very streamlined, focused specialty practice like ours.
And so how is it different here?
We have no layers, we are sleek in the way we can and do dedicate ourselves to our clients, to the delivery of legal services. So we get to just live our passion all the time, and it's wonderful. It's why I think large law firms have limited relevance to great hunks of American business, because they can't do what we're doing. By definition, they can't do it. And they're trying, they're struggling, they buy a practice and they graft it onto their structure, and it's an uneasy, tense marriage, and then it splinters again. That you see that happening all the time. Somebody described large law firms as hotels for lawyers, and I think there's a lot of truth in that.
What about creating an atmosphere? How important is that, and does that come from the people who are in charge, or is it the people you hire? How do you make a good space, or is that just luck?
It's not luck at all. In fact, I think it's probably the area that's easiest for good management to handle, because it is within your control. How you recruit, what your corporate mission is, you make that up. Nobody else makes that up for you. How you demonstrate your fidelity to a corporate mission is entirely within your control. How you recruit people, how you hire people, how you supervise people, train people, retain people, let people go. Any of that, all of those pieces demonstrate what kind of environment you want to create. And so if anybody says, who's in charge of a law firm, well, I'm sorry this is an offensive place to work, but there's nothing I can do about it, nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, it's entirely in your control.
And I mean, when it's nice, it's good, but when it's not nice, what do you do
Get
to
out.
make it get out?
If you're a low-level associate, get out. Don't waste your time trying to change a substantial size business, which happens to be a law firm, to see the world your way. That's not why they hired you. That's not what you're supposed to be doing there either. You're supposed to be delivering legal services to clients. And nobody is the least bit interested in changing a system that's working for them, even if it isn't working for you. So, I tell people, just leave. Don't dissipate your energy and your youth on a loser battle that's all internal. I guess that's in a nutshell why I'm so offended by large law firms, because all that energy usually goes internal. At least half of it every day is spent on internal politics. And what a waste. In our firm, we don't have to do that. We're small, we're focused, we're all doing the same thing, we all have the same goal. So about 99% of the energy goes out to the client.
And how much energy goes to personality and in just personal politics? And is that something students should be aware of or understand, sort of your...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in the end, it's human dynamics. No matter where you're working, we're not in a bubble. So you have to be very smart about human dynamics and politics. One of the things I tell young lawyers is everything counts. There's never a timeout. So if you think you're having a free moment in your law firm by revealing something very personal, you name it, I don't like it here, the partner I worked with is horrible, that counts. There aren't any timeouts. This is grown-up stuff,
It counts in what way?
It counts in that you've said it, you've done it, and it has repercussions, and you have to be ready and prepared to accept those repercussions. You hurt somebody's feelings. You've revealed to a hiring partner that you don't like the kind of law you're doing. What's a hiring partner supposed to do? Treat you as though you're a kindergartner and this is all part of your growth? No, they're saying, we have a business to run here, and we know that Susie really isn't that committed to the area we've assigned her to. And it's inevitable and correct that statement by Susie will have certain kinds of effects. She better be prepared for them. Now, she may be fully prepared for them. And I've seen lots of things come out of people having strategically said and done things that look risky in a law firm. But what I've also seen is a lot of people who are surprised by the fact that those consequences, which are quite obvious, occurred. They say, but I told you in confidence. I don't think so.
So that everything you say at work is a public statement.
Absolutely. And a lawyer ought to know that. I mean, that's what you tell your clients. Everything you do matters. Everything. The way you dress to go to court, the way you park your car, what car you're driving, all of that counts for your clients if you're in litigation. It counts for you as a litigator. The way you behave in a every day. If you're highly emotional and you're in my office, I'm going to know she's highly emotional, he's highly emotional, and I'm going to factor that in when I'm making decisions about what kind of work you get and who you deal with in the office.
But let me ask, so to make sure that it's not misunderstood, you're not saying to people, just be, no emotions, don't talk to anyone, don't ever do anything, but be yourself, but know the consequences of what you do, right?
It's called growing up. It's brutal. And I do understand that. I'd already grown up before I went to law school. And if you ask me, is there one single thing that accounts for your success? That's it. At 19, I left the United States. I lived for 2.5 years overseas in a little tiny town where nobody spoke a word of English. I was 100% on my own. I had no money even. They forgot to send me my Peace Corps allowance. It was the best thing in the world. I came back to the University of California at Berkeley, which is the most indifferent institution. I mean, they'll just grind you into dust. So you learn how to deal with an institution that on the one hand says, oh, we're so glad you're here, you're brilliant. Oh, by the way, we don't give a damn if you're here. So you have to constantly be searching out who am I, what do I need, how am I going to get it? Those are the most vital educations I received, I think. So by the time I went to law school, none of it seduced me. I mean, I remember being asked if I wanted to join Law Review, and I say this with all due respect for the fact that journals are important, and I admire people who have them. But they ask somebody who did not know that, didn't know the hierarchy of law school, didn't know that my grades had made this an opportunity for me. I didn't even know what my grades were. I was so terrified to open the envelope. So they asked me, and I said, sure, how much does it pay? And they said, oh, no, this is a voluntary position. I said, well, how long does it take? You know, and they said, oh, it takes 25, 30 hours a week. I said, you have to be kidding. I mean, to me, that was insanity. That of course, I couldn't have done it. I needed to support myself. But just the whole idea that somebody would be seduced into slavery, you know, because it was someone's idea of an elite moment. You know, not that it can't be, not that it isn't for some people, but it sure wasn't for me. So nothing about law school, aside from the fact it's kind of scary environment, but nothing I thought was really flashy. Didn't grab me like that. And that's a great. It's a great weapon, in a way, to keep yourself from falling into all these traps of living somebody else's life and values.
All right. Why don't we move on to balancing life? We'll come back to a little bit more on business, but that's the important part, the balancing part. So we had to balance it and put it in earlier.
You probably can't
Right.
balance life. I mean, it's sort of a myth, isn't it?
Right.
Tell
Why
me
do you
it's a
think
myth.
why do you think it's called balancing life? Why is
Yeah.
it sort of that binary? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's a binary. Do you know? It seems
Yeah,
like a
yeah, I
big
do.
mush of stuff.
Yeah, I think they know more and more that the human psyche is drawn toward harmony. You know, the perfect face is one that's equal on each side. You know, they do these kinds of studies and all. So I think we like to think in terms of dualities being harmonious. I don't know if there's anything to that beyond just having sort of People magazine view of, you know, harmony. But I think we think about work is here and everything else is over here, which
Mm-hmm.
is immediately out of balance. You know, you go. So I'm supposed to balance work with family, friends, leisure time, exercise, downtime, you know, all this stuff. It's already tipped in favor of work, and that's cultural. So what else about balance?
Well, like, how do you do it? I mean, I guess one of the things is that I think personally traveling is my kind of my soapbox again, that like finally women are in lots of positions, and yet the structure of law is still exactly the same as if women were at home. I mean, like, what's that about? And like, is that something, like, what happens? I mean, how can you balance if you're at work at this particular time, and then men? I mean, we've asked this a lot about men, about balancing life, and like, well, and one of the women said, well, it's very nice because they get to do the fun stuff with the kids, but you know, that, you know, like, and they think that's part that there's balancing, and you know, and so it's sort of that comment is sort of where we are and sort of how you personally deal with it, and sort of your staff and the people here, sort of, what does it mean to balance when you're like, when people come to you? I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
You know, in terms
There's
of
lots
conflict.
of questions in there. I think, first of all, there's no such thing as a balanced life. It's a dynamic process. So as your needs and interests change, you're always going to have to be measuring and deciding what to give up and what to prioritize. And I think that's really an important thing for people to remember, that you don't have to have a formula that's going to stay with you all your life. I think you want to be prepared to say every year, you sit down again and say, what do I want out of this year? What's different about this year from last year? Where do I need to change and put my energies? I think that's a healthy thing to do. Second, you cannot learn to be a good lawyer without putting a lot of time in it. It just happens to be that kind of profession where experience matters a lot. I think that what ultimately people want from a lawyer is judgment. You have to have a certain skill set, but what they really are looking for is someone whose judgment and strength seems to be so good that they can take the problem off their shoulders and literally put it on yours. And I don't know how you develop that kind of strength and ability except by experience. And experience isn't just years going by, it's what you're doing in those years. So I think at the beginning of a career, however you want to define beginning of a career, you need to be prepared to put a lot into it. You can later on maybe not put so much into it because you've got a good base and you're building all the time on a fairly developed skill set. But at the beginning, everything is so new and so different, everything, from trying to figure out how to write a pleading to where the courthouse is, to what you say when the judge turns to you and says, "Are you ready to begin, counselor?" You want to say, "No!" You know? So you just have to do those things again and again before they're yours. So my point is, at the beginning, I would say the balance is going to be tipped disproportionately to work. Works out kind of well because you're excited about it, it's new in your life, you've just trained for it for 3 years and all that. At what point do you want to say, well, I want to cut back on all this time at work because I have other things in my life to do? Whenever that point is, you just have to realize what you're going to give up at work, which might be increased development, partnership, learning new areas, more money, or it might be that you're going to give up nothing, really, because you've got yourself in a job where you're pretty much static anyway, and that was a good thing for you because it gives you this platform over here and a steady income and doing something you enjoy without a lot of intensity or pressure on it. And over here, you've got a new baby, a new husband, a new boyfriend, a new girlfriend, whatever. So it's always moving like this.
But it seems like with that model that you have, if you want anything besides work, your work, then you suffer at work. And that doesn't seem quite fair. I mean,
yeah.
do you think that's true? And do you see that like with your office here? I mean, it seems like, if you're only working, part of gaining experience is also having life experiences so you can bring that to your work as well, it seems like. I don't know, it just seems like that model drives me, not in a bad way, that seems the reality of the world, but sort of like, are you telling people that you can't have a life until you're at a particular level, and then even then you're going to be losing things because of it?
I think it's true. If you think of your profession as an ogre that's kind of eating away at what you really want to do, shouldn't be a lawyer. I do believe that there are lots of people who go to law school and shouldn't, and who then get in the practice and say, this is a lot more demanding than I want my job to be. That's a perfectly legitimate conclusion. I don't think anybody ought to beat themselves up about it. I think they ought to say, I'm not going to practice law, or I'm going to take my law degree and do something different, or I'm going to do a very small amount of legal work, and that's enough for me. I have many friends who've chosen that. They didn't want to be a superstar lawyer. It was not of interest to them. They've mastered certain skills, they provide a good service, they do it about 35, 40 hours a week, and it's fine. It is a job. Okay. Other people are restless about that, and they want to do more for other people or for themselves, for their reputation, whatever it might be motivating them. So I think if you say, I really want to be a famous lawyer, I want to be incredibly rich at the law, I want to be, you name it, then you're going to have to say, then that's going to be the thing that is around which the rest of your life orbits. That's the way it is. Or you can say, I want to get out of law altogether, in which case everything else in your life will be more dominant. I do think it isn't really possible to be a great lawyer, a really great lawyer, and not have that be the center primarily of your life, whether you're a man or a woman. Doesn't mean you can't have other rich things in your life, but I think we'd all be kidding ourselves if we didn't recognize that that has a really dominant influence. It dictates when you take your vacation, it dictates how long you go, it dictates whether you're going to be able to take the French class at the community college. And you probably are only going to fit one other big thing in there. In my case, it was always my job, my profession, and my family. And everything else just kind of went away. There were long periods of time where I don't remember sleeping. But that was my choice. I always felt so enriched by the practice of law. Not enriched materially, but just enriched that I loved doing it. And I still do love doing it. So for me, that balance is right. It's perfectly fair. It's what I like. It's what feeds me.
So how do you, if you're a youngish, no power type person in the law firm, and you do care about the law, you do feel passionate about it, but you also feel passionate about your family or your sick mother or a sick friend. I think family should be defined a little bit broader than just. How do you negotiate those spaces without feeling like you're going to get penalized at work for being a good person outside of work?
I think you have to be really realistic about the way your employer can manage those questions, because it's a two-way street. You can present the questions very intelligently and thoughtfully, and you should. You should think them through and not just emote all over everyone. Be a lawyer, have a problem, have an answer, have options, define the best option, and sell it. I tell people all the time, young people, you went to law school for a reason. Can't you use those skills on yourself every now and then? But recognize at the other end of that, they may be saying, well, that's fine, but we have this need and this need and this need. So think through what the responses are going to be. That's a good lawyer. And then be prepared to compromise. So you might not get it all, but you'll get something. And if it's not enough, then be prepared to leave.
Do you feel like you had to do that at all when you were raising your kids?
Yes, I did. I did. I think I have lots of regrets about the amount of time I wasn't with my children. But what's amazing is the amount of time I was. I never missed more than, I'd say, maybe 5 of my daughter's basketball games in 4 years of high school. I made a huge effort at it. What I ended up doing is taking any free time that I ever had, that was gone. I just didn't have any time that you would call personal time. I didn't do it. I never really felt deprived. It was hard to imagine a better life. It was very busy and crowded, but it was also just doing 2 things I loved. It was working and being with my family, including, my parents who were elder and all that kind of stuff. Those things all came about in my life when I was a pretty successful lawyer, so I had some more flexibility vis-a-vis the power system. I didn't have more flexibility in terms of my clients' demands. Those are real and constant. But I didn't have to report in. As long as my hours were legitimate, the income I brought in was sufficient, all those kinds of things. The bigger marks of what a large law firm looks at as you go through those years, as long as those were okay, then I could manage my time a bit more flexibly.
All right, let's move on.
Or you create your own world. And what you've been asking me is, how can I balance my life in the context of somebody else's idea of what I should be doing? And the answer there is, obviously, you're always going to have to be referring and deferring to somebody else's ideas. Create your own world, which goes back to my statement about passion. If I were in a situation like you've posited now in my life, if I were going back in time, I would not join a large law firm. First of all, I'm just too much of a radical to fit into a large system unless I own it. And second, I don't want to waste a minute of my time trying to educate people about my right to make decisions about my life. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. So I would just do my own thing. I'd find something I loved and some people that knew how to do it, and I'd say, hey, hire me for $25 an hour. It's a lot of money. If you've been a waitress, you know how much money that is, and there are no tips. And I'd learn it, and then I'd start to build a little client base, and I'd try to figure out, I only need to really bring in, $30,000 a year. That's a lot of money if you have no overhead and you're working out of your laundry room. And you can do that now. Technology's leveled the playing field in fabulous ways. You're good on a computer, man. You've got a whole law office sitting there just at your laptop. So I'd do that. I'd get involved in national groups that did what you want to do, whatever that is.
You guys are involved with I saw on your website you're involved with some sort of national group.
Many. We're involved with 3 different groups of immigration lawyers nationally. One is the American Immigration Lawyer Association, 7,000 lawyers. Obviously, I chair some committees there. I'm their general counsel, so I've been involved a long, long time. They're not so much a chat room, individual case resource as they are a bar association. Then we're in 2 other smaller groups of practitioners whose practices are closer to ours. And we're online with them every day. I probably spend 2 to 3 hours a day going back and forth with my colleagues nationally, helping them with the question they have, throwing out a question, dealing with new changes in the law, sharing information, all the time. And I need that. I love that. But it's also free. It makes me a better lawyer when we're not isolated.
All right, so let's turn to, I know we have to do marketing stuff, but we're going to run out of time too. We have to do sort of the dumb question, like small short questions that are all personal and you can answer as many as you want, and then we'll get to marketing, so we have to get those in too. What was your worst day as a lawyer?
Oh my, probably going to federal court with a file that I'd been told 10 minutes before. I didn't need to do anything, I just had to stand there, and I didn't even know the name of the case. And I went, and the judge, who was someone I admired and was terrified of, a federal district court judge, Koppel, started asking me questions about the case. And they were very important questions for our client, clearly. And I had to say, Your Honor, I am unaware of even the name of this case. I thought I was going to pass out right there. And he was, I suspect, at some level, very amused, but never let that show, and said very clearly, young lady, it's not appropriate for you to appear in my court on my case without knowing what it's about. And I knew that he was right, and then I went back and tried to bite the ankles of the partner who gave me that file. I mean, you know, you're between the rock and a hard place, because of course you can't really say to the partner, what the hell were you doing?
And what happened when you saw that judge again?
He actually died a year ago. I saw him many times in my career because I did a lot of federal litigation for a long time, and I never spoke of it, nor did he, even though there were times where we were in more of a social setting, and I could have. I always knew that the only thing you could do is just be the best lawyer you could possibly be from that moment on, and I never, ever, ever, ever have gone to court without knowing the file, ever. You know, I'm still scarred.
You're still. Okay. These are kind of the same questions, but maybe we can get another one. Sort of hardest or most difficult moment, like in practicing the law?
Having somebody's entire future rest on my legal skills, literally, whether they were going to go to jail first and then be deported to a country in which there was a very strong chance they'd be killed. It's very difficult for me.
How do you does that emotionally affect you when you go home? Do you disconnect?
It emotionally affected me every minute of my life, asleep or awake. Yes, it was brutal, and I did a lot of those kinds of cases for a long time. Political asylum cases in the context of someone having a criminal issue for which they'd been arrested. And I didn't do criminal law, so I always had a criminal defense lawyer with me to handle that piece, but it just, I mean, for me, I'm ill-suited to handle that kind of work because I take it, I swallow it, and I just carry it around like an alien baby of some kind. And so I finally stopped doing it. I did it for about 20 years.
Do you think that being a lawyer is in part taking clients' problems on their worries and their fears, and that's just part of it? Or do you think it's finding, like what you said, that you weren't suited to that particular type of thing?
I think you have to expect that you will be absorbing your clients' anxieties. How you absorb those and with what ability to compartmentalize is really a question of your personality and the subject matter. But no lawyer can do a good job if they don't empathize with their client. I take that back. You could do a journeyman's job. You won't be a great lawyer.
What about clients that are really difficult? Do you have examples or thoughts on how you dealt with, and what is a difficult client for you?
Difficult clients, that definition has changed over the years. At one point I would have said a difficult client is someone who had a bet the future of your life case. And that was difficult not because of their personality necessarily, but because of what they were bringing to me to solve. Now I'd say a difficult client is a client that's very demanding and has unreal expectations in terms of either response times or outcome. And I think that there really are no difficult clients at this stage in my career because I know how to manage that well. I know how to separate myself from that, not take on or feel defensive about something unreasonable, but instead to identify it as unreasonable and to say to a client, let's talk about this because I think your expectations are not going to be met. not just because I can't do it, but because the system won't allow it. Let's go through that and I'll explain to you why and see if we can come up with something we both agree can be done.
So do you think difficult clients are in part because you're learning, and that if you know, as you get more experienced, you have less difficult clients?
Absolutely. You don't have less difficult clients. You're more mature emotionally. You have more hands-on skill experience, so you can manage the difficult aspects of them, which are going to be what? They're unpleasant to you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you get to the point where you say, I have rights here too, and one of my rights is I don't have to be treated like this. So you learn how to say to your client, you don't say, shut up, don't talk to me like that. You might, in your evolution, you might say that. At first you'd say nothing and just cry, and then you get to, shut up, don't say that, or you get to, get out of here, I don't like you, or you complain bitterly to other partners. At some point you'll get good enough and comfortable enough and grown up enough, I guess, so you'll say, you and I have a very difficult time talking to each other. And I think part of it is because you tend to growl a lot at me, and I'm wondering why that is. Is it something I'm doing? Because if so, tell me. Or is it just sort of a pattern you have, and has it been successful for you? And you just do it like that.
Did you?
And then you fire. No.
Have you fired many clients?
Absolutely. I fire any client who is rude to my staff. I can take it, but they're not paid enough to do that. So
Do you tell them? Do you give them a warning, or do you just fire them?
depends on what they've done. If it's like baby rudeness, then I'll say, we really try very hard here to treat each other with respect. And it looked like we had a little breakdown here with you. Can we go over what happened? We go over what happened. I say, it sounds to me like what you said was really inappropriate, and it's outside what we allow in our office. Can we expect that that will never happen again? And if they're, puffing and huffing, I say, you know what, we're going to make sure it never happens again, and I'm going to send you some names of people that you can take your word to.
And how do are they surprised by that? I mean,
I would say stunned is a better word, and usually quite livid, but then that's the right thing to have done. You can't attack people, but if you have a toxic person, you don't have to keep them.
have you ever been scared of a client?
Physically scared? Yes. I was actually scared of an INS officer who had a mental breakdown, and I dialed 911. I was so alarmed. He was completely wacko and became belligerent and aggressive and kept standing up and coming toward me and my client, who was a Chinese woman about 92 pounds, soaking wet, and she was quite terrified, and so was I. In fact, at one point we were holding hands, and I realized I had my cell phone, so I dialed 911 and pushed enter, and then I stood up. I'm 5'10", 5'11", and walked to the door, opened the door, and yelled, "Help!" It's only a couple of years ago. I was very shaken by that. I've had one client where I felt physically threatened. It wasn't my client, it was an adversary in a litigation matter.
And what did you do? I mean, did you?
I got help. We were in a conference room, and I got over toward the door. But I also got mad, and I swore at him. And I'm not proud of that particularly, but it had the desired effect. And I didn't realize how I am a big person. I'm 5'11", I weigh about 160 pounds. So I said, shut the fuck up and sit the fuck down. And it wasn't my exact normal, Latin phrases. And the guy was really surprised because I hadn't been aggressive up to that point. Usually if we're, in some public setting and you see something awful happening on the street or something, I always yell, my husband will come and beat you up. He wasn't around at this time.
What about situations where being a woman became an issue? Do you have stories or things like that? And does it happen to is it getting less and less, and does it happen? How do you deal with that if that does happen? Do you know what I mean? Whatever that means. It doesn't
Sure.
have to go all the way to crazy sexual harassment stuff, but you
Right. I've been a lawyer for almost 30 years, so in the beginning, all the usual stuff, people would ask me to get coffee. The greatest advantage of being a lawyer, way back then, a woman lawyer, was nobody actually took you seriously at all. So people would tell you things that were unbelievable. The other side of of litigation would, to prove how brilliant they were, they'd tell you their strategy. It's kind of wonderful. Those days are gone. I think there are lots of really good women lawyers, and people take them seriously. So I don't think there's any of the sort of overt caveman behavior happening as much, if at all. But there certainly is a lot of stereotyping and discrimination that happen to women. Very few women are partners in large law firms. Very few women are on management teams of large law firms. They're not leaders proportionally in even the bar associations the way they should be, the way their numbers dictate. They're not sitting on the bench the way they should. So all of that says something about either systemic discrimination in the practice, and I think you described some of that earlier in one of your questions, where the system is very institutional and it's still more rigid, especially in large firms. The format really hasn't changed in 50 years, and that was a male format. So I think, have I personally experienced lots of times in the beginning of my career, very, very seldom now, and now if it happens, I mostly just make a joke out of it.
Like, give me an example. What do you mean?
Oh, gosh, I'm trying to think of. Somebody asked me maybe within the last month or so, if I thought as a woman, could I handle a particular matter, which I probably handled 5,000 times. And I said, I think I could handle it asleep, but if you want me to bring a man along, I'll be happy to do that as long as he doesn't talk. So, and then we all kind of laughed about it, and I said, look, I've done this many, many, many times. It's much more successful if you let me do it alone. I know exactly what's involved.
What about personality? Do you feel like you can be who you are and what you want? Like, each person has different personality, and sometimes it feels like you have to subsume your personality to.
Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible thing to do. And again, I tell all young lawyers, don't do that. It's one thing to behave irresponsibly in a juvenile manner. You can't do that in the workplace. It has nothing to do with being a lawyer or not, being a woman or not. You just can't do it. And lots of young lawyers make that mistake, boys and girls. They just act stupid, and then they wonder why they're treated in certain ways. And it's because they acted stupid. But if you're changing your personality in order to fit in, get out. Get out. Unless you have a really bad personality and the changes or something, all your friends say, I like you better now. But generally speaking, you can't sustain it. It's like trying to pretend you're a different sexual preference or trying to pretend you're a different race. You have to be what you are. And if you can't do that, all that energy to hide is lost energy to you. There's nothing left to do a good job at what you want to do. So absolutely get out. I have always been exactly who I am. And without being able to do that, I would have just withered up and died.
And does it matter whether people, do you worry about whether people like you, or do you just take who likes you and don't worry about the other people?
Everybody worries about being liked. I think you'd have to be another species if you didn't worry about that. But you have to really concentrate on worrying about whether people you like you, people you respect, like you. And there are times where you have to feel I'm going to be isolated and lonely because of what I'm about to say or do, but I'm prepared to do that because I've thought it through and I know it's important to me to say or do this, whatever it is. Those are just grown-up moments in life, and you have to be ready to do those, and particularly moments of leadership, frankly. And
do you have an example of that you've had?
Oh, yeah, a million of them probably, but I've often been someone who saw things differently than the rest of the group I'm in, whether that be sitting on the management committee of a large firm in which I would be advocating serious changes in the way we managed the recruitment of lawyers so that we would get minority lawyer representation in the firm. And that's not a popular, what you're going to propose is not a popular thing, and it threatens the people in the room. And you still need to go ahead and say it because the principle is so important, and because you truly think, as I did, the future of the firm really was going to be measured in part on the ability to diversify the workforce. So you say those things. And you won't win the point, but you hope you planted a seed and you'll be able to go back to it and nurture it and cultivate it.
And okay. We're going to run out of time, so I'll leave that as where it is. Okay, we'll give Vicky's question. Why do you give to law school? We'll do that one next.
Why do I give money to the
So
University of Arizona?
And why should people give? And why is giving back to legal education an important part of being a lawyer?
Well, obviously, it's an important part to give to any school, but to a public school, it's critical because law schools are always the last ones on the state legislature's wish list. We carry a lot of baggage with us as lawyers, and people don't love us first, although they come to us first in times of need. So, and we're seen as fairly well off as a profession, and also for many reasons we are not a group that gets state money, even though University of Arizona College of Law is a state-funded institution primarily. So the number one reason you should give is because the school needs your money. And the second reason you should give is because we're part of a community and a profession that we spend a lot of time training for, preparing for, and we use every day, and it gives us things. And so you simply have a duty to say thank you to the people who help make that possible, and that's your law school. And the third reason is you want to be a part of training lawyers really well. It's a dynamic process. What you did as a law student is not what this next generation will be doing or needing, and the change costs money. So you want to be at the forefront of advocating sophisticated, dynamic legal education for the community.
What about clinics? You guys you support one of the clinics.
Oh, I've already revealed that I'm a terrible academic, that I was a terrible academic student. So for me, learning is always hands-on. That's it for me. So clinics to me are fabulous. They teach people. They call on emotional intelligence, and I think women are particularly strong in that area. And most classic professional graduate school education does not call on emotional intelligence, it calls on intellect, just cerebral, analytical thinking. So I think it celebrates the diversity in the law school in a nice way. It calls on experience, and that calls a lot, that celebrates some of the diversity in terms of ethnicity and language skills and all that. So it's kind of a place where people who don't shine in a classic law school setting suddenly shine. It actually gives back to people. And that's in the end, is it teaches you client skills the way nothing else will. These are our clients. So I love that. And it's always cutting edge. The clinics are taking the cases that will demonstrate key principles, key issues, key policies, so that it's an archetype learning experience. So I love clinics.
So in terms of people giving, because you give in a lot of ways, you could give in terms of very specific passions that you care about to the law school, and that sort of, like if sort of not, it doesn't have to necessarily be a clinic, but there's other ways than just giving general check to the...
Right. You could participate as a mentor. You could participate as an expert in a particular clinic undertaking if you're a family lawyer and they've got a really tough case that needs somebody to quarterback it. You could certainly contribute in that way. You can give just material, computers, and time in your office if the people want to come down and use your facilities. There's all kinds of ways. But I think the most important thing is that you give money, because the law school knows how that money should be spent most wisely. They're right there on the front line making those decisions all the time.
all right. Can we just do you need to switch
No,
the tape? Are you okay?
I've got,
6
but I can.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay. We're going to skip a couple. We have a couple more areas we haven't covered, so they're really all over the place. Marketing. How important is marketing in terms of a law firm and being a lawyer in terms of that, since it's such a market-driven space at this point?
I think marketing is really, really important, but I think the definition of marketing is what hangs people up. Because if you hear the word as a young lawyer, you either think you're supposed to take clients golfing, or you're supposed to have some kind of wonderful ad campaign going, and neither of those things works very well, and certainly doesn't work very well for young lawyers. You can't afford to golf. Besides, who are you going to take golfing? You probably already have golfing partners. So generally speaking, you have to start small and may have reasonable expectations and develop a marketing plan that fits your personality as well as your goals. I mean, it has to be organic with who you are. In my case, I don't believe I've ever consciously marketed. I'm very uncomfortable with that. I don't know how to do that. I mean, cold calls or something. What I did is, by good just serendipity, I was in an area of law that nobody thought much of. It was sort of babushka law. And it grew and became important around me, not because of me certainly, but around me. And I kept moving with it and catching the next wave. And then I guess pick an area that you love, that you know has a future, get really good at it, and then just deliver the most wonderful service you can deliver all the time. That's worked for me. That has been my entire marketing plan. Now, if somebody comes along right now in an age of high technology, I think you have to do many other pieces. What they are depends on who you are and what your area is, but you should be open to them. The best technology you can use is the internet in many different ways. It can be, like a laser. It can be so focused. It can be very broad. It can allow you to partner with other lawyers so you present a complete package for a client. It can allow you to do dynamite presentations and PowerPoint and all those kinds of things. So get really, really good on technology. And then I'd say, again, hire an expert. Find somebody who understands legal marketing and that you like and respect and isn't going to just give you canned garbage. And then sit down with them and be prepared to spend the time and the money to get it right. Then know you're always going to be revisiting it and moving it out to the cutting edge and all that. So yes, market. Fundamentally, only market what you love and what you're good at. If you get a client and you can't deliver, it's not going to work.
And what about more about what you think that we're heading in terms of the future of the law practice?
Multidisciplinary practice, again, it's already here. Everybody's always standing around debating it. Hello. Large accounting firms have been doing legal work for years, so have real estate agencies, and so have just about everybody. So we're going to have to find a way to harmonize attorney-client privilege considerations, confidentiality considerations with the need to partner up with people who are not just lawyers. And that's a great thing, in my opinion. I know it's hard, and there's some challenges within that piece, but it's a great thing for consumers. It really is an intelligent, forward-looking move. In terms of how we deliver services, just kind of the practical, on-the-ground aspects, I think response times will become ever faster. Traditional research is already gone. I mean, we have maybe 10 books in this whole office, and we don't even use those. It's all online. It's all very, very easy to get drilled down to where you want to go, from case law point of view, from an articles point of view, from even contemporary newspaper editorials point of view. You can get it all really fast. I love being able to package quick answers to clients almost by return email, and you can do that now. So just the sheer speed and the sophistication of responses means that traditional lawyering is out the window. As clients become more demanding, that will accelerate that process. I think litigation is tired, archaic, irrelevant, wrong for a global community, and I look forward to the day where it's isolated to just a very, very few critical kinds of issues that must be adversarially decided. But otherwise, I think dispute resolution in all its myriad forms, short of litigation, is where we have to go. We just have to find more common ground.
Because of the expense and the time of litigation, or because of
it's stupid. It's a stupid way to solve problems when you live in each other's pockets. And we are literally a global community. We've never seen that more than in the last few weeks. And economically, spiritually, culturally, viscerally, we need to come together as a global community. And people do that all the time. My clients are all over the world. They speak to people all over the world. My friends are all over the world. And they can reach me anywhere, any cyber cafe in the world, in Tanzania, for God's sake. So recognizing that, then anything that draws artificial lines and divides us is wrong. It's wrong. We have to find ways to say, you give a little, I give a little, we both come out and keep going forward.